So again, my name is Solveig Nilsson Gooden. I'm a pastor here in the Oregon Synod. I am one of the editors and co-authors of A Grounded Faith, and I'm zooming in here on the ancestral homelands of many Indigenous peoples in the Portland area, Portland, Oregon, including the Cowlitz, Clackamas, and Multnomah peoples. So I'd like to begin our time today by sharing one of the devotionals from A Grounded Faith. This is a devotional. I'd like to just show you kind of how it's laid out. So every day during Lent looks a little bit like this. And what that is that we share a scripture passage. We share a quote from Randy Woodley's book, Becoming Rooted. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And then there's a devotion that one of us has written, and then an invitation to some sort of practice, spiritual practice or engagement. So this devotion is from the first week of Lent, the first Thursday of Lent, and it's connected to Becoming Rooted Day 4, which is called What the Plant People Are Saying. So from the Gospel of Mark, the first chapter, verses 12 to 13. Immediately, the Spirit drove Jesus out into the wilderness, and he remained there for 40 days and was tempted by Satan. He was with the wild beasts, and the angels looked after him. And from Becoming Rooted, humanity has yet to realize the fact that nature is wiser and more powerful than we are. Nature will, without a doubt, outlive us. She knows her mind, and she understands what keeps life in balance. Human, humus, humility. This past summer, my oldest son participated in a 9-day wilderness rite of passage for young men. For 2 of those nights, they fasted alone. This experience challenges and deeply humbles the boys becoming men, physically, mentally, spiritually. But this year, the rite of passage took place during the heat dome event that shot temperatures up to nearly 115 degrees Fahrenheit. The boys, the guides, and the families and friends back home all felt in our bones the vulnerability of human beings relative to the forces of nature. We picked up our son on a beautiful Sunday afternoon. He survived, they survived, thanks be to God. But exactly 1 week later, the Grandview fire ripped through the exact place we had welcomed the young men back from their journey. Whatever security we had felt having our son home safely was shaken again. We were humbled again. It could have been otherwise. The Lenten season traditionally begins with a reflection on Jesus' 40-day sojourn through the wilderness. The reflections in modern Western white Christianity often focus exclusively on the temptations Jesus encountered. Sometimes we even equate humility with simply the emotional consequence of our lack of willpower to keep up an exercise routine or refrain from eating chocolate. But Indigenous cultures the world over immediately recognize Jesus' journey as something infinitely deeper, a rite of passage, an initiatory experience that places the human in a relationship of complete and utter dependence upon the humus, earth, and the creator of both human and humus. Human, humus, and humility all come from the same root word, meaning earth or ground. Being humbled and held by the humus and the creator of humus, we discover what it is to be more deeply human. Many of us won't have the opportunity to participate in a wilderness rite of passage. But we can learn with humility from Indigenous peoples who recognize the value of such practices. And we can learn with even deeper humility why many Indigenous peoples are prevented from practicing such traditions in our present context. And we can also simply practice being human by spending time outside in humility, in silence, recognizing our vulnerability, our dependence, our connection as humans with humus and the creator of all that is. And the invitation for this devotion is to spend time outside in silence, observing, feeling, sensing, listening, recognizing with humility your vulnerability and your complete and utter dependence on all life and the giver of life. So I invite us to just take literally just 30 seconds. And if you have a window to look out, or if you can just imagine in your own mind looking out at the non-built world, the natural world, we sometimes say, and just take a moment to reflect on your own dependence. Amen. So I'd like to take a few moments and share the origin story of this devotional, this Lenten devotional that we have. And welcome to Ben, who just signed on as well. Glad to have you here. So the origin story of this book, and Robin, please fill in any gaps that I leave. So Robin and I are both part of a leadership development organization called Eco-Faith Recovery. And as part of our recovery, it's very, very clear that we need to learn from and be in relationship with Indigenous peoples who are more closely connected to a deeper wisdom. And so one of the Eco-Faith leaders, Janet Parker, claimed for herself the role of Eco-Faith's Elahe engagement coordinator. Elahe Center, Indigenous Center for Earth Justice, is a farm. It's a seed bank. It's a learning center, curated and created by friends of ours, Randy and Edith Woodley. And so Janet said, I'm going to just sign up and more intentionally create this connection between Indigenous wisdom shared by Randy and Edith and Eco-Faith Recovery. So we learned that Randy was just publishing this book, Becoming Rooted, 100 Days of Reconnecting with Sacred Earth. And it in of itself is a powerful, powerful immersion into Indigenous worldview. And so Janet said, okay, how can we connect folks who are in Christian circles who may not have that kind of connection already? How can we make a clearer connection? Well, so she says, well, what if we did a Lenten devotional? A lot of Christians, Lutheran types, especially maybe, or other more liturgical denominations are connected with those seasons. So what if we did a Lenten devotional? And what started as a like, oh, maybe we could do a little pamphlet or maybe a little, online something or other, quickly became this, because the Spirit was moving, essentially. So she reached out to folks from Ecumenical Ministries of Oregon and myself and some other writers. And so 7 of us writers co-wrote this book. And the idea of it is to have a devotion for every day during Lent, but in each devotion to draw on a thread of wisdom from Scripture and from indigenous wisdom, and to counter what I think many Christians have inherited, the belief that an indigenous worldview and a Christian worldview are incompatible, which from my perspective, nothing could be further from the truth. And yet we've inherited a legacy. And so in a very short amount of time, the Spirit moved very quickly, and we were able to publish this beautiful devotional. And so that happened just about a year ago. So there was very little time to really share it broadly with folks. So that's what we're trying to do now, and keep that moving. And but a few congregations did get to walk through it together. And one of those congregations is Spirit of Grace, where Robin Hartwig is the pastor. And so I'm going to invite Robin to share some of the learning, some of the gleaning, some of their experience with all of you as you ponder how you might want to engage this resource in your own context. So jot down any questions or any little things that sparkle for you or glisten for you. And we'll have lots of time after Robin shares for questions and comments and creative sort of brainstorming together. So Robin.
Thanks so much, Solveig. So I'm Robin Hartwig. I am on Kalapuya land here in Beaverton, Oregon, on the other side of the Willamette River from where Solveig is sitting, on the west side of Portland. And I am privileged to serve as quarter-time pastor organizer for Eco-Faith Recovery, this amazing community of volunteer leaders who I support with just a little bit of my vocational time. And 3/4 time, I serve as Lutheran pastor to Spirit of Grace, which is a Lutheran Catholic community in Beaverton. Before sharing a little about Spirit of Grace's experience using this Lenten devotional last year, I just want to say a big, big thank you to Solveig, as well as Janet and a number of other entirely volunteer leaders. This is the list right here of everybody who contributed to this devotional, with hours and hours and hours of their own writing time and editing time. And a big thank you also to Barclay Press for picking up this project. We originally thought it would just be a downloadable resource made, with Canva or something like that. And Cherise Bach had a connection with Barclay Press, and they thought it was worth the time and energy and effort. And they worked with the publisher of Becoming Rooted to get permission that we could excerpt some of Randy Woodley's words from the Becoming Rooted book that this was designed to amplify and to share in Christian communities to make it more readily available. On this page on the Eco-Faith site, ecofaithrecovery.org/Lenten-devotional, there are other links to how communities can order this. And there's also this testimonial from Chad Darby from Spirit of Grace about the strong impact this devotional had on him, which as the pastor, I was really surprised to get this email. We love getting emails like this as pastors, right? Like, wow, this was like the most profound Lent that I have ever experienced. And here's why it was so impactful to me. And then there's also the preview here of the book as well. But our leaders at Spirit of Grace picked this up pretty quickly when they found out that Eco-Faith Recovery was working on this, because it brought together the practice of Lent, which Lutherans and Catholics are used to having a devotional for Lent. They're used to gathering on Wednesday evenings for some kind of Lenten worship service, and used to being in conversation and prayer with one another on certain kinds of Lenten themes. But in particular, what appealed to folks from our community was how this brought together the concerns for caring for God's creation, which our community is pretty concerned about as we read the news right now. It brought together with that Indigenous wisdom through Randy Woodley's writing, but it also then brought in the voices of fellow Christian leaders who wanted to really take Randy Woodley's words to heart and say, what does this mean for those of us from a Christian faith tradition? What does it mean to actually look at the doctrine of discovery? What does it mean to listen to Indigenous wisdom? What does it mean to engage in land acknowledgement? What does it mean to consider reparations? So it's the devotional looks at systemic issues and also deeply personal ones, like what does it mean for us to get out into creation and actually directly ourselves connect with creation's wisdom? And so they really liked that. It appealed, and they thought doing both the personal and the kind of the systemic work in Lent made a lot of sense to them, and they wanted to engage as many folks from the community as possible. We have within our community folks who are connected with Thrivent Financial, and Thrivent has these action team grants that maybe some of you are aware of. Anybody who has an insurance policy or an investment account with Thrivent gets usually, I think, at least 2 action team grants a year, and they're $250. They're very easy to get. And so we used, I think, 2 action team grants to fund these Lenten devotionals for our whole community. With the $500 was enough. You get a bulk discount from Barclay Press when you order more than 10 of them. And you can also just get the digital version for $3. And some of our folks just wanted the digital version and not a print version. So that became a way that we could bring in this devotional that we hadn't put into our budget already at the beginning of the year and make it as broadly accessible to everybody as possible. The team that came together then to do this, and I wasn't even on the team, there was so much excitement around it. They just took the ball and ran with it. They wanted to have people not only engage with this on their own through the daily readings, but they wanted to have some writing in the weekly e-news to engage people more deeply. And they wanted to come together on Wednesday evenings for worship, with this devotional at the center of that. So the worship gatherings were 30-minute services, typical Lutheran type worship with prayer and some song that was chosen. And in the middle, one lay member of the community would share about their experience of that week's readings, anything they wanted. And so the team reached out to a number of people who they thought would have valuable reflections to share. And those reflections were just a whole lot of different beautiful things. Some people went very, very personal about how it was affecting them personally, reconnecting with creation, learning from Indigenous wisdom. And some people went really systemic, like a woman, maybe in her mid-70s, Roman Catholic background, who said, I have never heard about the doctrine of discovery ever. How is it possible that I am a Christian and a United States citizen, and I have never heard about the doctrine of discovery? And so she, as part of her devotional, she chose to share a video clip of Indigenous leaders telling about what the doctrine of discovery was and the impact it had on them. And she resolved to continue to keep learning more about the doctrine of discovery. Another man shared a devotional, and he was very into food justice. And he talked about the impoverishment of the nutrition in our food supply and what we could do in order to get better nutrition for ourselves, and what we could do in terms of advocacy or organizing to help people in food deserts get better food. And so his practice, he invited our community into what was to, along with him, consider what we were purchasing in our grocery cart when we went grocery shopping, and to consider how we could help those on the front lines of hunger get more nutritious access to real food grown by real people, and to use surplus produce as a way of bolstering what the food bank is able to offer in terms of nutrition. And he talked about how climate instability is decreasing the level of nutrition in everybody's food. So these were just people lay people from the pews, taking this stuff, making it their own and running with it. And folks really appreciated what their fellow lay members had to share. After that 30-minute devotional, or that 30-minute worship service rather, which included a practice. Each person invited us into a daily practice that week to do something along with them if we wanted to look at the doctrine of discovery, consider where our food came from, go out into nature, whatever they wanted to invite us into. Then we also took another 30 minutes after the worship service to have small group conversations. We were able to do that in a hybrid way. We had hybrid worship with people on Zoom and people in person, and each time we had about 4 in-person small groups and 3 or 4 breakout rooms on Zoom. We had anywhere from close to 40 people to up to 70 people joining us on Wednesday evenings. We worship about 100 on a Sunday. So we thought that was pretty good turnout, and could see that people really wanted to do this kind of engagement. Randy Woodley had just come out with his book, Becoming Rooted, as Solveig mentioned. And so we had already started in mid-January when that book came out. We had already started doing the 100 days of becoming rooted, reconnecting with sacred earth. And we thought it would be a great idea to add this Lenten devotional during Lent on top of that. And I no longer recommend that. It was too much for many people, unless they were retired and wanted to do a morning and evening devotional. Some of you are nodding your heads. You were smarter than me. You would have picked this up and realized it probably wasn't the best idea. So given our experience and the debriefing we had afterwards, I now recommend to others who want to do this to either do the Becoming Rooted journey before or after using the Lenten devotional. And, you can do the Lenten devotional, and after that 40 days, if the people really liked it and they love the quotes from Randy Woodley's book, Becoming Rooted, then it's a great opportunity to say, great, would we like to do the 100-day journey as a next step, either starting that in the Easter season or maybe in the fall and finishing it before Christmas would be another way to do it and get back to Randy's primary resource. Like we've been alluding to, our goal really was to amplify Randy's voice and maybe say some things to ourselves in a more pointed way as Christians than Randy could say to us as an Indigenous leader, to say, if this is what Randy's saying in this 100 days, what do we need to be looking at in terms of the doctrine of discovery, reparations, land acknowledgement? And that would give us an ability to say some of that maybe to ourselves in a slightly more challenging or pointed way, and use Lent, which is that season of self, introspection, to not only be personal introspection, but communal introspection, a time of introspection for the whole church, to look at what does it mean to be Christian within this context? What history do we still need to reconcile ourselves to? After each of those Wednesday evening gatherings, something from that the person had shared from their devotion time on the Wednesday evening went into the e-news that week, because we got busy parents who just can't necessarily come out. But the week that Nancy shared the video about the doctrine of discovery, we ran a paragraph from Nancy in the e-news about her commending to us this video from indigenous leaders, telling us what the doctrine of discovery was and firsthand experience of the impact it had had on them and on their communities. And the week that Chad shared about food supply, then we put, a little paragraph in the e-news, the weekly e-news from Chad, about the practice that people were invited into, so that even if they couldn't, read the devotion every day or come to the Wednesday evening gatherings, we just wanted everybody to be touched by this experience in some way, at whatever they could go, at whatever level was right for them. But really, you couldn't be in our community and not know that we were doing the grounded faith devotional and not know that it was based off of the book Becoming Rooted. So that's a little bit of what we learned from our experience, and many people in the community have already told me they would really commend this experience to any other Christian community that might like to take this journey.